Om Agnirmurta Chakshusi Chandra Suryo Vishaha Shrotrivak Vipritasha Vedaha Vayu Prana Hridaya Vishvamasa Padmayam Prativihi Sarvabhutantaratmam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Verily, that one indwelling presence is the consciousness in all beings and all things. Fire is its head, the sun and moon its two eyes. The revelation of cosmic scripture is its divine mind. The universe is its heart, its arms and legs, the four directions. Music is its voice. The wind is its breath. And from its feet, the earth has originated. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shutayaha Promanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Savana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the teachers, and with the world. And may we study what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome to the SRV Association's Hawaii ashram called Kedarnath, where a few of us here who are devotees of SRV, the great mother, Holy Mother, and the great Master, and the great Swami, Charada Ramakrishna Vivekananda, all gather on most Sundays to look into classes on what we like to call the Dharma. In this case, we're calling it, as we were speaking on the road, on the drive over today, the Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal religion of India. A nice expression, although it has been misused some, according to some of the swamis in India, what they've said to me. But if you look at it in its original intention, Sanatana Dharma is the eternal religion of India, is a nice way of pointing out and putting an emphasis on the Advaita Vedanta, or the eternal truth, because that's, according to Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel, is lived forever and will live forever. He calls it the Sanatana Dharma. And he says it's the great stream, and there are other streams, brooks, eddies, that may spring up from the ground and don't make it all the way to the ocean and go underground again. Those are paths that come along over the ages that help people, certain groups of people in certain areas of the world. But that one stream always reaches the conclusion. It's this strong underground river that reaches the ocean and takes you away from the ocean of samsara, called samsara sagara, or the ocean of suffering, brings you to the ananda sagara, the ocean of bliss and peace and indivisible oneness, which is the Advaita Vedanta. So we like to gather here and study under the mantle of this great stream, and whose waters are infilled with great traditions in India and probably I think outside too, but in India, streams like yoga and tantra and Sankhya, Jainism and Buddhism too all came from India. The Astika and the Nastika, orthodox and unorthodox pathways, so many of them in India. And then we find so many other pathways, the extended family of Buddhism that moved over some 54 generations from India to Japan and arose in Tibet and in China and in Japan and came all the way back to America, to New York and Chicago, about the time Swami Vivekananda was appearing in Chicago to bring the teachings of Vedanta to us Americans in 1893. So all of these are infilled with all these waters and paths that pay attention to the ancient Advaitic teachings of India, like Buddhism and Sufism and even some of our contemporary rabbis in Judaism that we know, and others are picking up on this eternal truth that, as you say, Sanatana Dharma, it doesn't translate as superior religion or some word that might offend other religious preferences or leanings, but it just states as what it is. It's an eternal truth that is appearing with different faces in different religions, and so that's made its way here to America too. So in 1893, as I said, with Swami Vivekananda's appearance at the Parliament of Religions, and so we have to find ways of explaining to people how to practice Vedanta, which is not really a practice. Yoga is more of a practice. It is yoga as practice. But Vedanta is more of a statement of non-dual truth, and so your practice becomes elevated by listening to it or hearing it and contemplating it and finally realizing it. So if I were to receive, as Ram Prasad says in one of his songs, I've received a command from the Divine Mother of the Universe that ignorance must die, and the idea of death is also ignorance, so that must die, then I would probably turn to a materialistic culture like America, as Swamiji did in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions, and give out this highest truth in no uncertain terms while he had the time to do it. He only lived 39 years and returned to his divine source, whom he called Kali, or Divine Mother. So then here, 1893, now we're talking about 2019 as we sit here, some years after his sequicentennial 150-year celebration of his appearance on Earth, a couple years ago. Now we're talking about how to continue to bring this message of the eternal Dharma to ears, and we're probably talking about in America mostly ears, Christian people were born, if not as practitioners of Christianity, but also practitioners of Judaism, and that could mean that you're a practitioner or you're just following a contemporary sort of conventional version of Judaism or Christianity, but basically you've been raised along that one stream, which is more Western, starting with Abraham, moving to Moses, moving to Jesus, and then moving to Muhammad. And so a lot of what's come to the West that isn't, that is in the form of religion, has come from one of these four sectors of that one stream. Well, we like to connect them all and say it was really intended to be one religion. And it just had, got a facelift over time with each of these different prophets, if you're to say that, if you're to be that open-minded. So if we were to try and treat Christian ears, Judeo-Christian ears, to a taste of this teaching, then maybe we should select something from Jesus's utterances. Like, for instance, if we were to say, if we wanted to try and explain practice in Vedanta and how one can practice that in whatever religion they happen to be selecting for their own religion, then you might say the best of all teachings would be separate the wheat from the chaff. So Jesus used that as a way of saying that you needed to be doing this practice. Separating the wheat from the chaff isn't just out in the field, obviously. It's not a story about farming. Although there are beautiful songs in India about farming the field of your mind. Oh mind, you do not know how to farm. You've been given seed, and you don't know how to sow it and plant it and nurture it. The song goes on like that. So wheat and the chaff then must have a deeper spiritual significance. So it's a simple saying. So if you were to practice that, then if you are a Christian and or contemporary member of that stream of Judeo-Christian stream, then you would probably say, I need to day by day be separating something, according to what Jesus said. Something has to be separated here. So you would start to do this separation practice because Jesus said, build your house on bedrock, not on sand. So you're going to have to begin to see what is it that's shifting and not reliable, and what is it that's solid and always that you can always depend upon. The bedrock and the sand. So if you're thinking in that terms, then your daily practice is going to be searching for that which is constantly changing, and then separating it out every day until you see what's unchanging lying underneath it, building your house on bedrock and not on shifting sand. So Vedanta would say then, you're going to need to find that bedrock, and they're calling it Brahman, and you might want to call it Almighty Father or God, and you begin to find out through this practice of separation of wheat and chaff that there's something called God and there's something called mammon. And at that point, then you've made a clear, hopefully, or becoming clear, delineation between what is changing and what is unchanging. And at that point, then you can begin to intensify your practice and turn this separation of wheat and chaff into an actual daily sadhana, we call it, or daily practice that you do. So you would be getting up every morning and going out to work, or being with your family, or traveling, or whatever you do. And instead of just mixing in the world indiscriminately with some religious things that you do occasionally, your mind is constantly sifting this chaff away from the real essence, the essence of family, the essence of wealth, the essence of possessions, the essence of objects and ownership in these things. These things become something that You're constantly putting into a category of the changing, the non-essential, if you want to call it. And as you do this practice and intensify it more and more, the essential or the unchanging comes forward, because it was buried or mixed before. It was completely buried means it was obscured 100%. We call that avarana shakti in our tradition, the veiling power. Everything divine is veiled, and you begin to think that everything is simply secular, or worldly. That matter is the reality. That body is the only existing thing, physical body. All these things we call the veiling power of avarana shakti. And when it shifts a little bit and we begin to maybe doubt that there's a veiling power, or that there's something being veiled, then we begin to see the things that we're separating out, leaving behind a sort of distorting influence. See? And that would be called vikshepa shakti. That something is looking like something other than what it really is, because of some trace or residue that was left behind from the practice of separating the wheat from the chaff. We call that karma, we call that samskaras, we call that residual thinking, we call that emotions coming back on us, we call that fuzziness of thinking, unclarity, confusion. I mean, you can put a bunch of words to the residual effect of doing this practice. And you want the field to be completely clean. And so when you found out that there's something called divine and something that's called, if you want to use Krishna's word for it, demoniacal, something sentient and something insentient, maybe would be better to give it a little bit more kindness, then you want to then shift your focus to God and away from mammon. Or use Indian terms, you want to concentrate on the Purusha and let get Prakriti aside. Nature has become overbearing, and so much so that the soul is beginning to identify with it. So now you need to disidentify with it and step back and be yourself, which is non-material being, a non-material entity. Doesn't consist of matter, doesn't consist of energy, and it doesn't consist of thought, as the Upanishads tell us. So this intensification process, or you might say this is the time for the intensification process to initiate. And so now your practice becomes every day waking up and trying to sift away the wheat that's gotten in the way from your last day's experiences. As they say in the non-dual scriptures of India, that pramadana sandeha kim karashyami vrittiman utpadyante vilayante buddhischa yata jale. Like Buddhists, like bubbles rising in water, your experiences accumulate from the past day, and they'll carry over with their effects into the next day, like bubbles constantly rising in water. So this residual effect, you want to disintegrate that, and you have to do it at the end of every day. So that kind of definitive process and practice would be enforced by separating the wheat from the chaff. And we call that in Vedanta viveka and vairagya. And so that is the practice of the Vedantist. It's a separating of the wheat from the chaff every day, from essence of the non-essence. And the non-material from the material, the changing from the unchanging. all of this is a constant practice one will engage in with the mind. And so that's usually afforded by listening to the truth of the Dharma from a teacher and taking teachings on the Dharma. So that's called Shravana. And then you follow that up with manana, contemplation. And so that eventually leads to nididhyasana, actual realization of what you have contemplated in your mind. So Shravana, manana, nididhyasana, sometimes those are called the three great pillars of Advaita Vedanta, or in another age, the three proofs of truth. So your practice is a practice in the mind every day, but the practice is going on in the mind, which is the kingdom of heaven and the gateway to hell both, as we've been discussing for the last 4 weeks, or last 3 weeks. That very mind then is now becoming subject to an intense scrutiny by your true self. Your Atman is witnessing all of these things that the mind is going through. The practice, the effects of the practice, and the practitioner are all being witnessed by your true self. These are subtler changes that are going on. You've gotten beyond maybe the gross changes and the chaff has gone away, but now you're getting to this very rarefied level of spiritual practice that you want to bring to fruition. That would be nididhyasana, or realization. So separating the wheat from the chaff, finding out the difference between God and mammon, and building your house on the bedrock instead of sand are probably the best ways of explaining what Vedantists are doing with Vedanta in this day and age, and the best ways of communicating to people in Judeo-Christian society what they can do as a practice. They can intensify their prayers, they can intensify their study of the scriptures, but they can do it in such a way that focuses on the essentials as a practice, not just a day-to-day going about believing, maybe some sort of belief, because beyond belief is faith. Belief won't live very long, as you might have noticed, in the secularized world, in the eye of science, or amongst atheists or unbelievers. Religion isn't going to have much of a chance, conventional religion isn't going to have much of a chance of taking you anywhere, what to speak of even surviving very long in those atmospheres of science and atheism and so forth. So this is a practice you can do, and it doesn't need to be called this or that, for instance, Vedantic or Christian or Advaitic or Judaism or anything like that. It's just a practice that everyone can do based on the simple sayings of a great soul like Jesus. So we gave a retreat on this some weeks ago, and yesterday one of my students wrote me in an excerpt from Swami Vivekananda, and he titled it, "It Doesn't Get Any Better Than This." And he was talking about the retreat we gave on Shravana, to hear the truth, Manana, to contemplate it, and Nididhyasana, to realize it completely. You don't stop halfway in Vedanta, you go all the way to realization of the truth. You might say the Vedantic way of separating the wheat from the chaff. So he says here, a quote from Swami Vivekananda, he writes, "This slavery has to be broken. How? The Atman has first to be heard of, then reasoned upon, and then meditated upon. This is the method of Advaita Gyan. The truth has to be heard, then reflected upon, then constantly asserted. So think always, I am Brahman, I am the infinite spirit. Every lesser thought must be cast aside as weakening. Cast aside every thought that says that you are merely a man or a woman. Let body go, let mind go, let everything go but the one existence. I am Brahman. This is to be heard day and night, after day after night. Everything lesser must be thrown aside. This truth has to be repeated continually, day and night, poured through the ears until it reaches the heart, until every nerve and muscle and drop of blood tingles with the idea, I am he, I am he. It is the greatest strength. It is religion. These are the words that will burn up the dross that is in the mind, words that will bring out the tremendous energy that is within the body, that is within you, that is there already, and words that will remain and awaken the infinite power which is sleeping in your heart. It's a nice quote from Swami Vivekananda, which was read at our center on the West Coast. So this student who sent this had been at the retreat on Shravana Manana Nidhi, and unbeknownst or not, had heard the teachings from the teacher about separating the wheat from the chaff. As Swamiji says so nicely here, it has to be heard by the ears and then taken deep into the heart. Okay, so that's listening, hearing the truth, and then going away and meditating on it. Sometimes people take this so seriously that they'll go away from house and from family and from work and from food, of anything convenient at hand. They will put those behind them and just go away just to contemplate on this one truth of existence. So that will cut through the chaff, and that will show you the difference between God and mammon. And then you can, in assurance, know that what God is, and that thou art that eventually, and enforce that within you, and then become realized. You could have samadhi, or Buddha called it nirvana, or Zen calls it satori, or Father of Yoga calls it asamprakyata, the seedless state. Vedanta calls it nirvikalpa, beyond time and space. So all of this is a preamble to the mind, because that second act of the three acts is called manana. So we've been connecting over the last three classes with and using different charts, Dharma charts I call them, Dharma art wisdom charts. How the mind is the kingdom of heaven within. We've also cautioned that, as Sri Ramakrishna said, it's also the doorway to hell if you're not careful. So we see that happening depending on the presence of this viveka, or this ability to separate the wheat from the chaff, the real from the unreal. That's how Vedanta puts it. Nitya nitya vasta viveka. By discrimination between anicca, the non-eternal or unreal, and nitya, the real, the eternal, and one reaches the highest truth. Nitya nitya vastu viveka. Vastu means like between. So you must discriminate between the real and the unreal. So whatever age it's been set in, all the way back to the time before Krishna, thousands of years prior to Jesus' time forward to Swami Vivekananda in 1893 when he gave it to us, and accented on by all the teachers of yoga, particularly by Vashishta and his Vashishta's yoga, this process of hearing, taking in, contemplating and meditating, and you could probably put intensified prayer along with that, because we know Christianity and Muslim practice depends heavily on prayer. And then finally realizing what this truth is, and by that realization getting rid of ignorance, getting rid of confusion. Get the all behind me, like Swamiji is saying here, in this nice quote. Everything must be replaced by that one thought, that one intense thought. Thou art that, or I am he. Aham brahmasmi, or tattvamasi. There are these sayings, of course, just a few little words and syllables, go way, way back in India's Sanatana Dharma, and show you that the rishis were thinking in that way, and giving you the simplest possible way to express yourself in philosophical language, so that this mind could always be a porthole to the different lokas. Now, last week we spent so much time on, in fact, we spent all our time on one chart that was called Abhavayoga and Mahayoga. And it was a cathedral in the sky that represented the mind, and it had everything from, we started at the top with the translucent, transcendent light of consciousness, how it filters down using intelligence, streams into these higher doorways and windows that are the avatar and the Divine Mother and her sons and daughters, and streaming down, out, really down means out, into this dome of many colored glasses, as the poet Shelley says. The one remains the same, the many change and pass. So that one light hitting the many-colored dome of this mind, we call mind, and that mind would be the great mind, and how it's manifesting, expressing itself in different ways, all the way down from the highest wisdom, intelligence, to modified wisdom. Modified wisdom would be called Abhavayoga. And there you have your secular knowledge. In India that would be the Vedangas, or the 6 limbs of knowledge. And then coming further out begins to appear as all the secular wisdom and so forth. And coming further out, it actually begins to turn into objects, all through these lokas or nadis. Last week in that chart we're putting it in terms of different levels of consciousness and their locations. But the various streams that it's moving through are called nadis. And so we will be able to move to this chart which explains that a little better. Because if you didn't see last week's class, you can look back on that and see that Abhavayoga expression of the great mind. And so today we'll want to look at it in terms of lokas, locations in time and space. Time and space meaning also internal. And then nadis, interesting word in yoga. The yogis know that energy moves through channels. Of course we know that too, but we know it mostly just on the physical level. So if we know that, become aware of subtle nadis, then basically we know that energy doesn't just stop with the physical, but it begins to encounter subtler forms or channels, and by that we'll move deeper inward. And this, of course, is the doorway to heaven. And we looked at that in the first class last week, 3 weeks ago, in terms of Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, how the physical realm, and then the realm of the ancestors, and then the realm of the celestials, you might say, gods and goddesses, are all three worlds of 7. And these are all connected by channels. Like something is, like towns are connected by rivers. So you move through along these flows of energy. The best way we can explain that in today's day and age is our dreams. When we move from the physical loka, we drop the 5 senses and we take on 5 subtle senses in dream. And we experience the realms of the mind called Kingdom of Heaven. So that's what this chart supposes to present, which is of course a very tall order. But you can see there it's lokas, nadis, and transmigration of souls. So Prajna Upanishad starts off by saying, in the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each of those are 100 more, and each of these branch into 72,000 others. In all of these the Shakti power flows. So Prajna Upanishad is one of those Upanishads that talks a lot about prana, We don't hear a lot mentioned about prana as a teaching in the other Upanishads, many of them. Nor is it taught in Samkhya Yoga, for instance. There's 24 cosmic principles, but what's connecting them all isn't specified in Lord Kapula's system. So we go looking for teachings on prana, which is the life force that is flowing through these various channels. And it, as it becomes more rarefied, which Vivekananda said is called psychic prana, he gave us that teaching when he was here. Then the prana that moves your arms and allows you to see and hear and taste and touch and smell and do everything outward also has 5 forms inside and allows you to connect to your subtle body. Your gross body is one expression, and your subtle body is like your dream body or your heaven body. So you're moving inward like that, and you're having experiences in dream. And your thoughts, which don't take up any space, so you have become minimized to little forms of energy, and they're just flowing through these channels, just like blood is flowing through these outer channels. So this flow of prana becomes more and more rarefied and becomes psychic prana, and that's what's beginning to flow inwardly, and it penetrates through being's attachment or being's focus or emphasis on the physical. And every night people become then walkers of the skies. They, as I said, sometimes they go deeper inside of themselves and they use their subtle body to experience. They have subtle forms of seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling. They have subtle forms of earth, air, fire, water, and ether. So those 10 things, 10 subtle senses and 5 subtle senses and 5 gross senses and 5 subtle objects and 5 gross objects are components of these 2 different bodies. And what's connecting them in this is psychic prana that's flowing into the mind, because the mind is the kingdom of heaven, as we've been saying. And that's how beings naturally move from one state of consciousness to another. To become aware of that is an entirely different thing, like we chanted at the beginning of class. Become aware of this is called enlightenment, basically. So your state of knowing with the mind is either impeded by this ignorance, or it's opened up completely by intelligence, by awareness of it. So awareness or non-awareness is kind of the point, which kind of goes us back to this need for a practice between the wheat and the chaff. If you use your intelligence to uncover the essence of things, or if you don't have access to this intelligence and leave your mind ignorant, then of course mind becomes risky, mind becomes sick, mind becomes imbalanced, mind becomes infused, mind becomes the breeding ground for lower worlds and beings that frequent them. If on the other hand you're doing this practice and intensifying all the time, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana style, then your mind becomes more open, the nadis become full-blown, the lotuses become full-blown. The channels that go in between these lotuses, you can see them pictured here, 7 of them. And you can see side by side the 3 worlds that go with the 3 lower chakras and the 4 worlds that go with the 4 upper chakras. Or 3 there, actually. And then, of course, the crown chakra is not really a chakra at all. It's spiritual awareness. And so, back to, say, India's Sanatana Dharma, when you learn about Vedanta in a more universal way, you're learning about yoga. So when you learn about yoga, you learn about the nadis. Then you learn about Kundalini Yoga some. When you learn about Kundalini Yoga, you learn about the centers. And then the yoga and Kundalini yoga together will show you how those channels connect to centers. And then if you are studying other forms of Indian Buddhism, Indian Sanatana Dharma, like Buddhism, then you'll learn about nirvana and transcendent consciousness and karma, and how those are impediments, like these grantis here, keep the mind from going to higher, deeper places, keep it pinioned in earth, and so you'll then learn about samsara and why it is that beings can't get enlightened, why it is that they keep coming back into grosser forms, insect, animal, and impeded human forms. They don't have that knowledge of lokas, nadis, and how the soul transmigrates. India, in its Sanatana Dharma form, has known this for thousands of years, has always known this. It's been an eternal teaching. They've never fallen out of knowledge of it. There's always some great beings from the fields of Shaivism and Shaktism, and some from Vaishnavism and so forth, that always keep these teachings aware, available to aware souls, like in Shiva and Shakti form. The divine couple is at the root of this. So we could say God, truth, and mother. You see, God, truth, and mother. Those are the three things we want to be aware of at all times. And so Prajna Upanishad, speaking about these nadis and the energy that flows through them. Other Upanishads also mention these systems. Within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness. In its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, are where all the universes exist. So they're not really making any, mincing any words or anything. It's basically inside the heart. There's these. In fact, I think it says here, bathe at the most sacred confluence of holy rivers, found within the precious human body, in the hearts where the three spiritual nerve channels meet. So basically, the Sushumna, the Ida, and the Pingala, circling up the central channel. So you're trying to, in an age where these channels have been blocked by ignorance, then you're trying to open up these channels with intense practices like separating the wheat from the chaff. There's become too much chaff strewn around that central channel at the very bottom, and beings can't penetrate through it, so they have to separate that, the unreal, the changing, the problematic, the confusing, the off-putting, the negative. They have to get down there in that lower center, you see, called here the Muladhara, and do the separating process, you see. And so they can begin to see that beyond mammon there is God. Beyond illusion there is illusion and delusion. There is this divine reality called Kundalini Shakti in one system, or called Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in another system, or called Purusha in another system, called Atman in another system, or Almighty Father, or Allah, or whatever you want to call it. There's this divine reality that has been covered over and or distorted, and it needs to be seen as it truly is. In all of this, in India, this is not a transformation that's happening, because Brahman is not subject to change whatsoever. That the mind has just gathered dust, as Shankara would say. The mirror of the mind is not reflecting its true nature, which is the Atman behind it. So the practice every day is of cleaning of the mind. if you clean the mind only to a certain degree, then you go to heaven. And the dust that you didn't clear beyond, that was veiling the second world from the third world, has more dust on it. See? So you have to go back to earth, get a good teacher, hear the truth, contemplate it more intensely, realize it, and then elevate her up. See? Penetrate all the knots of consciousness, the Brahma Granthi, the Vishnu Granthi, and the Rudra Granthi. And this will open up all 7 interior realms of you, which are all a part of the mind, all 6 really a part of the mind. The mind at the individual level, the mind at the collective level, and the mind at the cosmic level. It's all one mind, God's mind, Mahat, the Trinity, however you want to call it. They're assigned up here too. I'm not going through this, we've gone through this chart quite a few times, so I'll leave the live streaming audience, or people who will see this class in the future can of course go back and stop it and look at it and see the different assignments that have been placed here. But basically another version of the kingdom of heaven within you, which is the mind, as we've been emphasizing over and over again for the last 3 weeks here on our fourth and final week of this class. Another saying here, the individual soul is as subtle as a hair point, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. So that would infinitesimally small. You see, it begins to speak to us of what's beyond atoms and what's beyond subatomic particles. And if you believe just in objects, and then you study the object with the modern technology, and you find a pool of vibrating particles changing so fast that the mind can't even detect it, senses can't even fathom it, then you should feel like you're building your house on sand, shifting sand. But if you don't, you think, well, that's the ultimate truth, because matter is the only truth here. Body is the truth. The senses that enjoy the objects are the only truth. Then you're not going to look any further for particles that are subtler and subtler and subtler. And so you'll miss out on the realm of the ancestors, where they went, although you're still thinking about them, and thought is a kind of vibration, see, that's built on particles too. And so you're Xing out of the equation all the other worlds but the Bur Loka. We looked at that a week before last in our examination of the 3 worlds. So these lower heaven and higher heaven become unknowns to most people, and when they get to Earth in their next lifetime, they'll hear about them from conventional religion only as a mere mention. You see, like Kingdom of Heaven is within you mention. So, but if you just left the kingdom of the heaven is within you that Jesus said, and just accepted that outright and didn't explore it, then you didn't separate the wheat from the chaff of what he was saying. You see, you have to take that saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and think about it, hear it first. That would be Shravana. And then you're going to have to manana it, you see. Roll it over and in the mind. Does that just mean, I'm going to think about it for a few minutes and then, okay, I think I understood what he said. But obviously, there's a lot more to understand in philosophy and in the company of the seers, in the great souls, like the apostles were doing with Jesus, and Sri Ramakrishna's disciples were doing with him, and Shankara's disciples were doing with him throughout the ages, every time any of these great beings came to earth with their followers, whether the followers be 8, 12, 16, or 20. Because Buddha had the Noble 8, you see, around him, and some arhats. So these beings were into the practices. What do you mean by that, sir? I mean, if you look at the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, even in this day and age, then people would come to Sri Ramakrishna, they were Hindus at the time, 1800s, and they would say to him, sir, what is the way? He'd say something. He'd say, what do you mean by that? You see? So that's the process of Shravana. You hear something. perk something in you. You want to know what the inner meaning of that is. So in the case of the kingdom of heaven lies within you, the inner meaning of that is in the tradition, you see. You take that saying deeper and you think, what did he mean by the inner kingdom of heaven is within you? You might say, well, what is within? Oh, that means in my body. But there's no heavenly thing in there, in a decaying cage of bones and flesh. So maybe it's in the particles, if I'm a scientist, but there's nothing but shifting sand there. There's no substance, there's no foundation, nothing to build anything on. You're left high and dry, you see, to make any sort of apt conclusion. So then where's the next within I will go? You see, I can't go within the object, the particle, and I can't go within my body. So it must take up my mind next. And there I'll find this whole expansive worlds called lokas and nadis. The nerves that connect them, the strains or flows of wisdom that connect them, and the ignorance that impedes them. You see. So I'm going to have to open up my mind by contemplating dharmic truths that, with the power invested in them, given by the scriptures and the seers, penetrate through my ignorance that I've been holding on to maybe for lifetimes. Because I don't even know where I came from or where I'm going, you see, on this world. And your parents aren't telling you. Only if you find some esoteric wisdom, that might tell you. So then you find out somebody who's speaking to you about these things which you want to contemplate on very deeply. Not just one day, but every day of your life, and intensify until even a word can send you into samadhi. Maybe 2 or 3 words like tattvamasi. Here, let me put it to you as easy as I can. Tattvamasi, that thou art. You are that reality that you're searching for. But you're going to have to remove some blocks in the way of that. So then you refer to these great souls who give you these teachings. And they will tell you in different ways too. They might tell you in ways that are surprising to you. Brahmadyaha suraganaha katamatra shanti svargadayo vashayata katamatra shanti Yadi eka rupam mamalam paramartam tattvam ganamritam samarasam gaganopamoham ganamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Beautiful verse by the Avadut. And he sings his song and refers to this kingdom of the mind that we're talking about. Because here you see all the various lokas and the gods that preside over them. Saptarishis and various levels of being who are residing in the thoughts of your mind, actually. I mean, you see, it's all concept of the mind. It's all in your mind. Even the Western psychologists would say that, but they're actually saying something very profound that they're not contemplating, is that everything is in the mind. And the mind has got the projecting power. And if it's aware of the projecting power, then it's got Shakti. If it's unaware, then it's got other forms of Shakti that are veiling and distorting. So the Avadut sings here, in the Supreme Brahman, all the gods have merged. Therefore, all the many worlds and lokas that the gods preside in and over also melt away, soluble into that. The three worlds are thus seen as a dreamlike projection. And I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. So you can see how beautiful a realized soul like this, who dwells in the crown chakra, can say, in the supreme Brahman, all of the worlds disappear, you see, and all the gods that are in them merge into that. They're soluble into that. Everything's soluble into Brahman, is what Sri Ramakrishna said when he was alive. So, and what to speak of that, even the three lower worlds are really a mental projection. They're a dream, dreamlike. Life is but a dream. Row, row, row your boat. So, conscious rowing is going to be called upon. You see, some separating the wheat from the chaff, some knowing the difference between the real and the unreal, between God and mammon. These are sayings and thoughts that have been uttered a long time ago. If 2,000 years is very long, it's not in India, but they've been uttered a long time ago and they still have force, but people are just taking them on face value, hearing them once and letting them pass by, hearing them once and thinking, I think I understand that. But did they ever connect them to lokas and nadis, and how souls transmigrate, and how they finally give up transmigration and reach enlightenment? You have to go that deep with it. You can't just stop and think, I think I understand that. And that's the same with any tradition and with any teacher. You can't just stop at some point and say, I understood enough of that, now I can just go back to my life and not separate the wheat from the chaff anymore. See, as more chaff is still coming your way. See, you're still farming. Your mind is still farming. It's called projection. It's producing things. The chaff are children and wives and husbands and money and objects and lifetimes and pleasures and pains and sorrows and sufferings, joys, everything transitory. The mind's projecting it all the time. And it's coming from a very high source called the cosmic mind. Those are high, high heavens that probably aren't even inferred in the teachings in the Bible or the Old Testament. The deeper contemplation is going to be needed to understand, one, that there are higher heavens than the one that have been referred to, two, that you can transcend heaven, and three, that the whole purpose of life is to do that and get realized, and probably four, that the whole thing is a projection of your mind. It's all a dream, like the Abhavayoga is saying here. I mean, he goes on singing about it, as this is a long stotram that I'm selecting things from. He sings, Kantara mandiramidam hikatam vadami samsiddha samshayamidam hikatam vadami evam nirantarasamam hi nirakulam vai gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham nirjiva jiva rahitam satatam vaibhati nirbija bija rahitam satatam vibhati nirvana bandha rahitam satatam vibhati gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. So he goes on singing like this for an hour or more, and he's enwrapped. You could see like he's doing his own spontaneous manana, all the time. His mind is now, all the channels are open. So he's just looking around his mind, noticing the wonderment of it all, focusing on one atom of intelligence, like a scientist might focus on an atom of matter, and bursting it, and out comes this power of revelation. And he delights in that, for hours on end, for days on end, for the rest of his life. And it doesn't have to put like any deep, intense effort into it anymore. It's just become natural. So he sings about that. He says, Brahman requires no proving anymore. It stymies all doubt. Mountains, streams, temples, forests are all incomparable to it. With a single eye, one will see it pervading everything, ever pure, unaffected, and always stationary, like that bedrock. And me, I'm pure existence, wisdom, and bliss. As boundless as the sky, infinite like space. Transcending freedom and bondage, beyond life and matter, outstripping all seeds and their respective origins. It just shines eternally. Its light dissolves all divisions and barriers. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss. I know this now, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. So, outstripping all seeds and their origins, the seeds that gave rise to worlds, seed thoughts, because these seed thoughts are coming from you, see, and from your ancestors, and from the angels and celestials, who by the billions are thinking heaven, heaven, earth, movement, origins, see, birth, death, reborn. See, thoughts like this are at the lower aspect of the mind, called the individual mind and collective mind, are being fed, you see, and being carried by energy called prana and psychic prana through channels, through different levels of consciousness, until they reach a granti they can't go beyond. So they have to transmigrate. He says, its light dissolves all divisions and barriers. So the barrier of Vishnu Granti would get dissolved at one point by a deeply thinking, intense yogi or yogini, and in the next lifetime would penetrate that, or maybe while they're still living in the body on earth, in that one lifetime that they gain enlightenment, would penetrate the heart chakra, into the heart chakra, using the body as a sort of territory, as a sort of symbol for what's inside, our subtler bodies and our causal body. So our outer body, it's discarded in dream and in deep sleep. So just you should be able to do that in meditation too, and as the Tibetan Buddhists say, at the time of passing, because they call this bardos. You see, calling it lokas, but they're calling them bardos. You're visiting different levels of time and space. And so at one point you'll have a conscious death, and you'll be able to transcend the impetus of your mind, the desire to be reborn again, which is what earth and heaven is all about. The desire to be reborn again, the desire for progeny, the desire for more wealth, the desire for more lands, the desire for more enjoyments, the desire for more intellectual attainments, the desire for scholasticism, the desire for intellectualism, the desire of a scientist, see, or a quantum physicist. heard a Buddhist speaker the other day was talking about Stephen Hawking's, and his view of consciousness was that we're all just a kind of a cosmic slime. And he said, well, I think Stephen Hawking is a very intelligent person as a scientist, but he made an error. He's made a huge error by thinking that we're all just cosmic slime floating on the surface of some physical ocean. You see, a direct quote from a very intellectual person who's respected by the intelligentsia, but who knows absolutely nothing beyond the Burloka. Maybe isn't even interested in where he came from or where he's going, except at the level of the Burloka. That there's a subtle body that's conducting all this. There are channels through the subtle body that's carrying subtle energy called prana that we've never heard of here in the West. Man does not live by bread alone. If you heard that story from Jesus, then you'd go somewhere and think about that for days and weeks. Then what is it that I live by? And if you just ask the question, you've already began a spiritual search. We know that what and where and when and why are W questions that don't lead us very far. But who is another W question, the 5 W questions that will lead you. So you begin to question, who am I means, am I the body? Am I energy? Am I enjoyment? Am I 5 senses and their enjoyments? What happened to me, in deep sleep that I lost myself last night? What happened to me when I had that deep meditation come upon me, or that vision? Then all of a sudden, what, where, when, why, and who become very profound questions under the veil, the umbrella there of manana, of shravana, manana, and nidijasana. They become modes and methods by which you can separate the wheat from the chaff. There it is, right there. Your ability to do that is your own. And it's not going to be granted to you by God, and it's not going to be impeded by the devil. Because gods and devils are all in the mind. Concepts are all in the mind. And you are that one who is looking on and using the mind and its powers. And how will you use them then? To awaken, or to fall deeper into dream and sleep? Or waking dream. Because the waking state is a kind of dream accompanied by waking projections called objects. So you would become aware all of a sudden of a whole different trajectory, a whole different tradition, a whole different direction that moves inward. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And now you have the teachings around it, you have the teachers accompanying you and encouraging you, and you have the power of awakening, revelatory power, that is neither the veiling power nor the distorting power, but is the revealing power, Prakasha Shakti. And by that you begin to exercise your divine right and wake up from all dreams. In our tradition, because in other traditions there are ways in which dream can be used, like in Sufism and so forth, to point you in a very inward direction that will help you. But in Vedanta, the teaching is always from dreams awake, from bonds be free. Eventually you're going to want to awake from all dreams, even profound dreams, and see yourself as the dreamer. And those, I could sing a song about that, or a song or two about, oh dreamer, you must awake. It's like, oh mind, you must become aware of all this projection you're doing with billions of other particles of intelligence. Because last week at our chart, Aparavidya, we saw how out of the transcendent light everything comes in a flow of intelligent particles. Like Swamiji saying, intelligence is the first compound of consciousness. Consciousness would be Brahman, but its highest and most purest effect would be intelligence. And that would be the first horse out the gate. See, and then all the other 24 cosmic principles or 35 cosmic principles would follow in train, and the mind would get a hold of them and eventually dumb them down until where you've got an earth with billions of people on it, unaware of where they came from, where they're going, how they come and go, what the purpose of coming and going is, if any. It's been covered. And occasionally you'll get a Moses or a Jesus or an Abraham or someone who has a revelation of it, a burning bush or some vision on the road to Damascus. However it comes to you, all of a sudden the covering has been, a hole has been made in the covering, and it just opened for a while and then closed again, like a profound dream. See? So you're always on the verge, if you're a seeker, and particularly if you're intensifying your practice of separating the wheat from the chaff, you're always aware of the imminence and immediacy of revelation. See, Divine Mother, we call her. She's ready to open up that hole for you, draw that curtain aside so you can get a glimpse. And they say about her wisdom sword, it comes arcing down, you see. And the great souls say they want to be right on the edge of that sword, so when she cuts through the veil of ignorance, that is cosmic, collective, and individual, she cuts through it all, like Brahman shining eternally and completely dissolving all divisions and barriers. They want to be right there on the edge to see the first revelation. See? So there are souls like that who hang around, as it were, in realms that are veiled or distorted, and are just waiting for that divine arc of her wisdom sword to cut through all of it, so they can be there to see, you see. And all of that is sung in beautiful stotrams or in bhajans and told in the Dharma by the different seers and expressed through the various darshanas of India, all which are a part of the Sanatana Dharma, this eternal truth that has always been there, will always be there. Now, will we go seeking it? And when we seek it, will we intensify and reach the goal of human existence? We'll find out after the break.